Hello again, my fluffs and my fuzzies. Fenni here once again with another commissioner interview. Today I'll be speaking with Musi, a customer who has commissioned a lovely image in this video. Without further ado, let's dive right in, shall we? And here we go. Hello there, and welcome to our video. I have with me Musi, the customer who ordered today's speed paint, and today we're going to be talking about her character and all the inspirations and ideas that brought the character to life. Musi, thank you for coming today, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Musi, or Lily. Musi is the 24-year-old Arctic fox, and she's definitely a very important character to me because of how personal she is to me, and so I'm glad to talk about her a little bit.
That's fantastic. I love working with people who have a genuine emotional invested interest in the subject matter that they're having me draw. So, getting right into it, what was your first inspiration that initially caused you to spark the idea to create this character in the first place? How did the initial inspiration bring you to the end results that you have in your character today?
So I can't take credit for making Musi, that goes to my girlfriend. When we were not living together, we would RP and all that stuff very frequently. One day when she was at work, she decided to cutely say, "You're an Arctic fox, I'm gonna have you in my backpack while we're working," and we kind of RP'd that. And I was just this cute white snow fox named Musi, and it was kind of just something cute between the two of us that we just did to pass the time and bond a little bit. But since then, Musi has grown quite a bit, and she's kind of been that character that stuck with me more so than some other characters we'd make during that time, where it felt like every week we'd try something new.
That makes sense, and that's really adorable, by the way. So, since you've had the character for so long and it just started off as a spur-of-the-moment idea, what kinds of features did she have between then and now that has evolved over time, and what features do you feel hold symbolic meaning for you in keeping them as far as they've stayed the same throughout the years? Such as any items that you have on her at all times that are mandatory in your ref sheet, and what do those symbols mean for you?
Well, as I said, she kind of started as a cute feral fox. I mean, I like feeling cute, so that was good. That was always something that was kind of part of her design. As it developed, of course, I found myself using her as a character more and more, and so it would just be like RPs that have her eventually be anthro and whatever was needed in the moment. I kind of adapted her to the situation, so for a while, her gender wasn't always female, something that changed later on as part of me coming to terms with my transition and stuff like that. But some of the details kind of added over time as I drew a more personal connection with Musi. The things like the paw tattoos, they were just kind of something meant to be cute and sexy because, well, both in real life and as a character, really love the idea of belly rubs and gently being held from behind, and it was kind of meant to be a cute yet slightly lewd way of suggesting that.
The simplest game of Twister ever.
Yes, place paws here. Foxes come with instructions.
There you go. That's the best. I love that idea. And with that bit of sassy, flirty sexuality that has been entwined into your character, what does that mean for you as you've evolved?
So, what does that mean for me personally?
Yes.
Well, for me personally, I always kind of liked showing off, feeling appreciated, wanted, or just being looked at like I'm sexy. Not necessarily like I want to be objectified, but I want people to think I'm pretty. And
well, you are.
Thank you. And so, doing those things that make me feel cute or sexy and sharing them with others has always been something to be fun. It's kind of been something that drives me when I commission art, and that kind of is part of where the paws came in.
So would you say that that's part of the personality factors that bolster and encourage your self-esteem?
To an extent, yeah. It's something cute in my character that helps me show bits of my own personality and helps me feel a little bit better about myself.
That's fantastic, and that's what a persona or an original character like an OC is supposed to do. Now, as a character, does your character have any special abilities or unique aspects about them that you'd like to call attention to or share?
As a character, she doesn't really have anything fixed. As I mentioned earlier, the way my girlfriend and I RP'd, we basically making new things every week. So there never really was a set world in which Musi existed and this is where she originated from. It's more of, she was just kind of like, I adapted her to whatever setting or world or theme I had in mind and play around with it. Something that happens a lot with those sorts of things would be like magic and stuff like that, and she always would be like a kind of magic user just because that felt like it would fit her personality as well, where she's both like that sweet and flirty, but she's also not like physically aggressive. She's more like a playful person. I feel like magic fits that sort of playfulness. And of course, as an Arctic fox, ice magic is a must. So that's usually the spells she picks have like ice themes. Although on occasions I have given her chloromancy and plant themes, because I also feel it kind of fits her personality of like that kind of sweet growth as well. And aesthetically fits the flower in her head.
And you know, that also kind of works really well with the ice feathers that you have going down the one leg and the one arm.
Yeah, those actually were, again, from RP. This one was more of like, it was an RP group I used to be a part of where it was like a shared thing, kind of had this world where all our characters would meet and mingle and have adventures together.
So how did she end up with the ice feathers?
So I don't think it was ever something written down in RP, but it was kind of the first time I gave her magic was ice magic, and there was like someone helped her get it. And so I felt like a good way to both have like a unique design on her body as a character that would be fitting to her and her personality while also looking beautiful would be to emulate ice feathers, which if you ever seen like the way the frost kind of feathers out when it freezes on like a car window or something like that, that was kind of the inspiration for that particular design. I decided to just kind of trace over her body so it didn't cover it, but it would be visible no matter where you looked at.
That is a really creative way to do that, and it's such a subtle touch to the character who otherwise has a really simple color palette to her for all intents and purposes. It's mostly like a minty green, a blue, and a purple.
Yeah, the minty green was a fun one to pick. So when her ref was first being drawn, the artist was just made a gradient in the background. And at the time, I was thinking of like an ivory color for her fur, just like a slightly off-white. But then I saw the shade of green in the gradient of the background and was like, wait a second, that goes better together with everything else than her current fur color. So I kind of like directed the artist to eyedrop it, reduce the saturation a little bit, and let's try that as her fur color. So that's where the ever so slightly green off-white color came into play.
I find that really aesthetically pleasing because if you look at a color wheel and study color theory at all, which I know you have done a little bit of as you do some of your own art, if you look, the green and the purple are kind of juxtaposed on the color wheel, and in color theory, those opposite end colors tend to complement each other.
Yeah, the complementary colors where the two colors that don't mix at all go together really well. And it's actually, I feel like it kind of like more on the complementary colors, like the purple is very vibrant and upfront in a very small part of her body, whereas the green is almost the opposite. It's very mellow, toned down over her entire fur coat.
Less saturated, more pastel.
But they still are complementing each other, so fun little bit of color theory there.
That works really well together, and I love that. And how it just coincidentally came together like that is just amazing to me. I love how art like that works, how it comes to life and evolves, and you could have an idea in your head at the beginning and come out with something completely different but better.
Musi's definitely been a surprise here and there, and I'm very glad to have her as my character on my way to present myself in the fandom.
And I understand with the backstory that you have for how she developed as a character, you've mostly paralleled her personality and her development with your own. And with that in mind, in what ways has Musi as a character inspired you and shaped your personality as a whole?
So, besides being a very core part of my relationship with my girlfriend and just like that cute thing we have together and how it's grown between us, Musi kind of also let me come to terms with my own gender and discover that I am trans and I'm most comfortable as a woman. When Musi was first a character, the cute little white fox in my girlfriend's backpack, gender didn't really matter. It was whatever it wanted to be. So, as RPs after that, maybe she'd be male, maybe she'd be female, maybe she'd be something in between, but it was what I ever felt exploring with, and it gave me this opportunity to kind of inflect myself in different ways, feel what I enjoyed, feel what I felt comfortable with. And over time, something other people noticed a little bit before me, but I was always seemed to favor like having Musi be female or very feminine, and she eventually kind of solidified into being female right about the same time as I came to terms with my trances, I finally had that epiphany moment where it felt like a lightning bolt hit my head and shit, I'm happier as a woman. And that epiphany also kind of just like locked in all that stuff, and it was a very emotional moment for me, but I'm very glad to have had it, and I'm very glad that Musi and all the exploration in the fandom and RP and writing let me explore myself, that I could have that moment.
And I do commend you for that, because it takes a lot of strength of character and a lot of strength of will to accept certain things about oneself and have the self-awareness to acknowledge it, embrace it, and move forward with it.
Absolutely, because leading up to that moment, I had this feeling that's like, no, I'm a guy, because it's just too much work to try and be a girl, it's not worth it, it's like, I'll just be, I guess, a little gender fluid, I like to express myself. But then after that epiphany, it's like, no, this is me, Lily, Musi, the woman I want to be, not the guy I was pretending to be. So it is a very emotional moment, and it's like takes that bit of like introspection that is very hard to have sometimes, especially when it's like some people have trouble just feeling it's okay to be something other than what they were born as.
But to actually take the initiative and make yourself into someone that can be comfortable in their own skin, despite any flack that you might get for it or any stigma that's associated with it or anything, but to go against all of that and still embrace who you are as a person is extremely honorable and commendable, and I respect that a lot. With all of that in mind, and knowing how the development of Musi as a character has affected you and brought out these aspects of your personality and of yourself in being able to do so freely online without as much judgment and stigma being associated with it, and knowing that there's more available acceptance, what does the furry fandom in a nutshell mean to you, and why?
The two words I constantly go back to whenever people ask me about the fandom are self-expression and creativity. I really feel like that's the core of the fandom, because no matter what part of the fandom you look at, whether it's the fursuiters, the artists, the writers, the RPers, all of it, it's about that creativity and self-expression, about trying to find what's like fun ways to present yourself online. Even if it's not something as personal as Musi, it's still some way to show yourself off to other people in a very carefree, fun environment.
That's fantastic, and that's a great way to look at it. So, do you have anything that you want to ask me about maybe what went into your art piece in general, or anything to that effect?
So, I know we talked about this when I placed the commission, where this was an experimental piece. You said you were inspired by a few specific styles.
Well, as far as the overall pose, the outfit, and the visual effects in the piece, the filters and the background itself, and how the lighting is perceived, it was an experiment to emulate a style that really caught my eye, and, it really made me want to try something new, which was based on an old 90s era comic book that was turned into a cartoon. It only had about 13 episodes before it was canceled, but it was a more adult animation from the 90s by the name of The Maxx, with 2 X's. I'll post some imagery here in the video to show what I'm talking about, so people can go and look at it on their own, support the original release. But I won't go into too much detail about the show itself, other than to say that I really enjoyed all of the shifts in style and tone, the way that it handles the line work and the colors. For instance, the style struck me as something dynamic, and it pops, and it's pleasing to the eye with its detail. It doesn't look like a kid's show, but it's very stylized with its proportions, the way the lines flow, and the way it handles shadows and color saturation, depending on the mood that it's trying to set for what's going on in the show. The aesthetic ideas, most of that is what I really wanted to capture in this particular piece.
I will say the pieces you shared with me and the final result you have, they do look very 90s and very stylistic. So the experiment itself seems to be like most distinct from your shadings and proportions compared to your normal art. You already said you were going for a bit of a stylized piece, but do you want to talk a little bit about what you did that was specifically different?
Absolutely. The main things that I did differently lay in the shape of the eyes, the exaggeration of the curves and the hips and the bosom, big old boobies, you gotta love them. And the flow and the exaggerated details like the hair and the outfit. The outfit was a big thing for me because I really just wanted to draw that outfit.
You wanted to draw a thick girl in the outfit.
Yes. The clothing itself has a lot to do with how the eye is drawn to the focal points of the piece. It guides your mind to look at the things that really set the tone and the mood of the overall piece of art, and the relaxed posture of the character and the way the clothing falls and the way the hair is blowing in the breeze and it's somehow still surrounded by darkness, and it gets into less technical territory and more into the abstract here, but I feel what stands out the most in my mind with how I did things differently is the posing combined with the fact that I did the lines themselves in a thicker brush with a higher stabilization rate to keep them smooth but still have more of a hand-drawn feel due to the pressure sensitivity, and that way there's more dynamic difference between some small detail lines as opposed to the thicker outline, if that makes sense. So it looks more like it's drawn with an ink pen than digitally enhanced, especially where it's most visible in the eyes and in the hair. I did try adding a different shading style with the image, where I normally do hard cell shading, which is I change the effect of the layers and do low lights, mid-tones, and highlights with each being on their separate layers. I generally use the color dodge and color burn layer types to make the shadows less flat, but in this particular case, not only did I use the different layer types, but I used a different kind of brush for a watercolor effect, which in Clip Studio Paint is the dense watercolor brush, which at first looked really choppy and kind of blotchy, and it made me a little concerned about making things too dark in some areas as opposed to how light the highlights were, because with the color dodging, the highlights were not showing up as much as I would have liked them to show up based on the overall fur color with the really light minty green. So what I ended up doing was using a lot of the blending tool and trying to give it a more painterly effect, like it was actually painted in watercolor.
Yeah, I do like the, it would be called color banding if it was a more strict gradient, but like the watercolor effect you said does create for some interesting and inconsistent transitions that are fun to follow with the eye. I know, at least personally, I do like having the extreme difference between light and dark, so if you had made this one a bit darker, it would have looked different for sure, but it still might have been something I would have liked.
I understand, and while I do feel like the shading in this experiment could have been pulled off more effectively if I hadn't been so shy with the opacity meter, I do think that it lends the image an overall ethereal feel to it that I really enjoyed, and I did learn some things that I'm going to put into effect on your next piece, which should come out in the next week or so.
I look forward to it. I'm glad I could help you experiment and grow your style.
I appreciate it. I really love doing artistic freedom experiments, but because I don't know exactly how high a quality they're gonna turn out with what I'm wanting to try with them, I try to charge a little bit less for the experimentals than I would in general, simply because I can't guarantee what you're gonna be getting.
Alright, well, I'm honestly happy with it.
I am certainly glad you are. It was a really fun piece to do, and I appreciate you ordering it. As far as when you do have experience with artists and purchasing art of your character in general, what are the things that you tend to look for when deciding what kind of art to get for your character, and what traits do you find more desirable in the artists that you choose to bring those ideas to life?
Well, when I'm looking for artists, I'm kind of just like generally looking for like styles I like or themes and such that I like. I definitely like the semi-realistic or semi-toony styles, which I feel fit furry anthro bodies very nicely because it still gets like playful stuff going on. As far as themes, really huge fan of cyberpunk, but not really like too much I don't like, I don't think.
Are there any particular art styles that generally strike you as something that you just couldn't see relating to your character? Something that might not fit the overall aesthetic that you have developed for your character?
Things that are just very exaggerated and out of the realm of what I would feel comfortable kind of myself.
So anything that would stretch the proportions or the personality type of your character to an extreme that you don't feel comfortable with, like putting her in an out of character situation, like maybe she's being overly mean or aggressive to somebody, or the expression is a little more harsh than you would intend to be for her, or something to that effect.
I don't mean to say she can't be angry, but I don't think I have any art of it either. But yeah, things that just kind of don't fit as a character or as part of myself. Definitely are the things I don't commission as much.
Would you say you lean more toward stylized realism or more toward cartoony and more animated type Looney Tunes-ish type style?
I'm probably finding my comfortable limits a little bit between them. Like, Looney Tunes definitely is a little bit too zany, even though, like, some exaggeration in proportions, like with the piece you drew, you definitely exaggerated, like, the hips and the bust and stuff like that to kind of give her a little bit more curves and stuff like that. Like, that's a level of exaggeration that doesn't make me feel uncomfortable.
So keep the exaggeration within reason and don't hyperinflate certain body parts or anything like that, but you want to keep the proportions believable, such as in a more anime type style or closer to realism, but without, say, photorealistic fur texture or anything to that extent.
Yeah, I still like the semi-realistic styles. As far as like the fur texture goes, there are some absolutely beautiful like renders and paintings, and that's kind of where I break the not going for like the very strict realism, because like I have a few in my gallery I've commissioned with that painted style, and it just looks very nice to see like the soft furry Musi or furry characters in general that have been very carefully rendered.
Where you can literally pick out every little hair in the face.
More or less, yeah.
I know they can look pretty if they're pulled off right. I personally tend to fall in the realm of more serious, plot-toned anime style.
Yeah, it's definitely a different approach or style of art, going for the digital illustration versus the, I suppose, more traditional furry style, with that like quasi-realistic, or however you phrased it earlier, where it tries to keep relatively realistic proportions, but it doesn't focus on photorealism or keeping things within the bounds of reality too strongly.
That makes sense. Keep it imaginative, but reasonable.
Furry fandom's about creativity, after all, right?
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you might want to tell the viewers about yourself or your character, or any advice you might want to offer anybody who might be struggling with developing an in-depth character of their own that they can relate to?
So as far as developing a character of your own, if you want to make something personal, don't worry about making it like unique and making sure it has like all these sorts of things that set it apart from the rest of the fandom. As much as I say the fandom's about creativity, there's also this thing where so much of it has been done before that if you try to be absolutely unique, you are more likely to betray yourself. Instead, kind of focus on a few qualities, try and be distinct more so than unique. So like the flower in my hair, I'm sure you can find plenty of sonas with flowers in their hairs, wearing collars, having paw tattoos, all these things. But just like as a whole package, she is distinct as a character, and she is pleasant to look at and reflects myself in a way that I feel good sharing with others.
Okay, one last question before we wrap things up here. If someone was to ask you for advice on buying their first commissions, what kind of traits do you find the most desirable in artists that you choose to commission for orders to develop your character?
Something that I find important for commissioning artists, especially if I'm going to return to them, are ones that are willing to communicate with me or that I can trust to get something done if I ask them to. If it's your first commission, well, one, I'd recommend you get a ref because it's so much fun to get that reference and feel your character kind of come to life. Then two, it helps you just send something to an artist and let them have it with a little less meddling on your behalf. But try and find someone that you would be able to communicate with reliably so that you can get these ideas and find what looks right and what fits for you, and you can be happy with that art you get.
That makes sense. As far as advice to customers that are looking to commission their first artists, what would you say are some qualities that make artists stand out to you as ones that you're willing to return to?
After I've worked with them that first time, if it felt like a good experience, because sometimes, as I said, I'll be working with them directly, talking, trying to get ideas for something specific. Sometimes I'll just send them a general idea and say, have at it. And kind of based on that experience, if I feel like they were doing a good job of communicating and what I was saying was being listened to, I usually feel good about returning to them. And this has extended to like foreign artists who don't speak English well. They still do a good job of trying to understand what I'm saying and me trying to understand what they're saying. So even if I have to kind of parse what I say, So hopefully Google Translate will help them if they can't understand it. They still made that effort to communicate and to understand and make sure things turn out right for me, so both I'm happy and they're happy with the end result, and maybe I'll come back as a customer, which I have a few times.
Fantastic. That sounds like sound advice as far as I can tell. So, if I'm understanding what you're saying right, willingness to communicate, willingness to listen, making an effort to meet the expectations that they set down, and being expressive if there are any kind of delays or anything to that effect are generally what make you willing to come back and recommission an artist once you've worked with them.
Yes, and on the flip side, if I have trouble contacting them, that makes me a little more hesitant to come back to them. But if I'm able to talk to them and it's I feel like I'm being read and I feel like my words are being communicated, then that fear is not quite as strong.
So level of engagement is encouraging too.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, it does kind of depend on what I want out of a commission. If I want something specific, that level of engagement is super important. If it's something like an artist posted a YCH and I see something they like, the level of engagement isn't as important as, okay, here's my ref, here's my PayPal, I look forward to it.
But at least being able to get updates if it takes a little while for them to get the art to you or to deliver a work in progress or something to that effect.
Oh yeah, even if I have a YCH, it's great when I'm able to ask the artist a question and get a response back in a reasonable time.
Fantastic. Well, those are definitely some things that people can use to move forward with their own character designs and in shopping around for artists to help them develop it if they're not designing it on their own, of course. Well, it's been a real pleasure having you appear today and to work on this piece of art for you. And it's been great speaking with you, and I hope to do this again soon.
Alright, take care, Fenni.
You too. And there you have it, folks. That was my interview with Musi. I hope you found it to be an enjoyable experience. I know I did. Now I leave you with the question of the day. Do you have a character you've made that you heavily relate to or identify with? If so, how has this shaped your perceptions, and what are some of the pros and cons that you attribute to these developments? Answer in the comments below and your answer could appear in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content, and until next time, take care, be well, and goodbye.